There's a mug for you.
Hail to the chief!
Do we have to salute him?
Oh, that was great. Welcome everybody to our October membership meeting, and hope you're all well and safe and staying out of trouble at home. And first, I'd like to have a couple of housekeeping items here. All our microphones will be muted except those who are moderators and the speakers. And if you want your the best visual impact on your screen, go at the top of your screen and select View Options, and then there's a side-by-side mode from the list that gets you the best view of this presentation today. And at any time, you can ask questions using the chat button at the bottom of your participants panel. Write in your question, and that comes directly to the participant panel. And our agenda is we're going to go through the the introductions of some folks, and then Greg's going to do the joke of the day, and I will give you a status of what's happening with the branch and our return to Bridges, where and when. John Knowles can do the birthday boys and the speaker and events update, and then Michael Lee is going to do the activity group update on what's going on with all of our activities. Dan Mahoney will introduce our speaker, who is Dave Carey, and Dave will be on, including at the end we'll have a question and answer period, and then our very own Golden Pipes, Mike Phelan, will sing "God Bless America" to us, and then we have, as we had last month, a special drawing for 3 of our participants in the meeting. We'll get $25 checks sent to us by our treasurer. So more on that later. And then when we close the meeting, we're going to keep everything open with everybody's mic on for about 20-30 minutes for a free-for-all. And the last couple of times, our speakers stayed on to answer questions. So that's always a lot of fun. Okay. On a sad note, we lost Sir Carl Top about 4 weeks ago. And Carl has been with us for about 4 years. He was a very, very active participant in our Tuesday golf session. So rest in peace, Carl. We're going to miss you, buddy. I'd like to welcome our guests who are joining us today, and also our 2 new members, Robert Alpert and Thomas Stone. And Robert is a resident of Danville. He was a school principal in the San Ramon School District system. He likes book club. Well, of course he does. He's a teacher. He likes golf, fishing, and poker. And Robert Cavilla, we got a new wallet for your poker table. And also like to welcome Tom Stone, who lives in Discovery Bay. And in his career, he was a tool and die maker, and he likes baseball, dine out, golf, and also poker. So Mr. Cavilla, you've got some new fresh blood coming your way. So be careful, guys. It's a rough crowd out there at the poker tables. This is my favorite part of the meeting. And this is the time when we introduce all our 12 past Big Sirs and give them the respect that they deserve. So guys, if you can stand up and take a bow. And I also like to mention little known facts about these guys. And last month, it was, this is the original group picture from the first graduating class of the Betty Ford Clinic in 1949. And now, I know you didn't know this, but this is also the first group picture of the founding members of the Jane Fonda Fan Club back in 1968. So nice going, guys. Yep. Okay, our speaker today is going to be Dave Carey, who's a highly decorated naval aviator and a graduate of the Naval Academy. Dave's going to be with us in about 15 minutes or so to talk about his experiences as a PEOW in Hanoi for about 5.5 years. So Dave, we welcome you. And okay, it's time for our jokes. And I want to give a little thanks out to Joe Ravello for being our guest joke meister last month when Greg was off to rehab. But he's back now. And Greg, it's all yours.
Okay, good morning. I don't know if you guys can see me, but there's two jokes that I particularly like to tell. The first kind is things that could really happen. You know, even though it's a joke, it's something that could really happen. That's the first one. And then the second kind is something that's so ludicrous that you know it's impossible to happen. So I'm going to do one of each. So there's this woman who is really getting sick and tired of her husband coming home late. She's convinced he's got a girlfriend, you know. So, you know, one day he's not home yet, and she writes a note, leaves it on the dresser, and then crawls under the bed. And the note says, you know, I've had it with you coming home late. I've left, you know, don't come and look for me. So she's under the bed. She hears him pull up in the driveway. And he comes in, he's rustling around the kitchen a little bit, and he comes upstairs and he looks over on the dresser. He sees the note on the dresser, and she can see he's standing by the dresser, you know, writing something on the note. And then he picks up his phone and says, yeah, you know, honey, she's finally gone, and, you know, put on your French nightie and I'll be over there in a few minutes so we can do all those naughty things that we talked about. And so he goes, and she hears the car pull out of the driveway. And now she comes out from under the bed. She's completely, her plan is totally backfired. She's in tears. You know, finally she goes over and she looks at the note on the dresser, and it says, I can see your feet. We're out of bread. I'll be back in 10 minutes. Now that could really happen. The second joke is something that's probably not going to happen, only something that maybe somebody could think of. But before I tell it, this is a joke I'm bringing out of the vault. I told it a few years ago, and it's a Bubba joke. And somebody was worried that Bubba, you know, it was a racist joke and Bubba was a black guy. Bubba's not a black guy. He's not a white guy. He's not a green guy. He's not a purple guy. He's just Bubba. Okay, so don't read into anything. So at the zoo, there's a female gorilla that goes into heat, and they don't have a male gorilla. So there's nothing, you know, the head zookeeper thinks, well, you know, what about that guy, Bubba? You know, he's a big guy, you know, he's got hair all over, you know, call him in here. So the head guy says to Bubba, he says, Bubba, would you have sex with the female gorilla for $200? And Bubba thinks, he says, I got 3 conditions. He says, the first one is, he said, you'll never tell anybody about this. And the second thing is, you know, I don't have to kiss her. Okay. And then, you know, the head guy says, well, what's your third condition? He says, well, you got to give me a week to come up with the money.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Welcome back. Good ones. Want to give you a little update on where we are, and there's not a whole lot of changes since last time, but there are some things that I want to mention that's worth repeating. And first off, no meeting to the bridges until at least the first quarter of next year. And the bridge is now open for bookings, but it's limited at 70 people, 4 to a table, plated meals only. Now that doesn't fit our needs. We will continue these Zoom meetings until they get back to 100% of operation. And that won't be until Contra Costa gives us the okay for lifting the restrictions on all meetings and group gatherings. But I want to emphasize again that we will not reopen. This is our number one priority. We will not reopen for group gatherings until it's unconditionally 100% safe to do so. So more to follow as things start to open up. And we started this last month instead of a raffle, we randomly pick 3 names from the participant list of this meeting. And we draw them, and each guy will receive a $25 check from our treasurer, Oct Sir. And look at this guy over here. I mean, he wins $100 million in the lottery, and then 2 days later, he finds the woman of his dreams. I mean, come on, is that guy lucky or what? We sent him an application for the branch so we can get his girlfriend to our ladies, our ladies functions. Okay, periodically, we recognize sirs who go above and beyond in the branch to do those things to make our branch a little higher quality. And this award goes to Joe Velson, who's done a couple of things extremely well. One is his participation as a leader of the STEM group. But most important, for Joe and his team have coordinated and built and produced these monthly Zoom meetings. And for that, Joe gets the Above and Beyond Award. So nice going, Joe. Thank you very much for everything you've done. And another Sir we want to recognize is our very own Major General Sir Ron Lowe, who by order of the Secretary of the Army has been awarded the honor of the Distinguished Member of the Civil Affairs Regiment of the United States Army. And oh, by the way, that is not Ron's college ROTC picture. He actually does look that good. So Ron, congratulations on the award, and we're very proud of you, buddy. Nice job. Okay, now I'd like to turn this over to little Sir John Lowe to take it from here. John, it's all yours.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. I wanted to add one thing about John's Above and Beyond Award. I wanted to also call out, in addition to Joe Velson, Dan Poulin for all of the work that he does to get these meetings together. Behind the scenes, guys, we do a lot of work to put on this meeting, and I have to say that Dan and Joe do an exceptional amount. Thank you guys very much for helping us out putting this together. Having said that, we have 2 longevity awards I wanted to point out. Wing and Roger are both 5-year members, and congratulations to them. And I hope you are enjoying yourselves. We have a pretty good selection of birthday boys this month. There's some pretty good names on here. We've got Ernie and we have one, John Kent, a couple of old big sirs, and Bob Lyons, Alan Schroeder. Let's go with a happy birthday to you guys and everybody else on the list. Hit it, Dan.
It's your birthday. Happy birthday. It's your birthday. Happy birthday. It's a great day. That's what we say. Happy birthday to you.
Well, I am very grateful that they don't ask me to sing that song. I think that one of the key things we provide for the sirs during this pandemic is a chance to have some exciting, interesting speakers. And for November and December, I think we've got a couple of really outstanding ones. First of all, in November, we're going to talk about the coronavirus economics. Dr. John Haberman from Marin County, who is widely respected, a PhD in economics, is going to talk to us. And he's just not a ephemeral kind of above us all. He's a good down-to-earth speaker. And then in December, courtesy of AARP, we have Nurse Alice Benjamin, and she will talk to us about brain health. I think that's something that'll be meaningful to us as we're sitting here in COVID semi-isolation. And then for the upcoming year, we have a couple of things on our agenda for first quarter, and we'll talk more about that at later meetings. The second part of doing things together as SIRS is working with certain events where we get together and go out and do things. And we have none planned for the balance of 2021, and probably won't have any for 2021, for the balance of 2020. And we probably will not have any early in 2021. However, what we on the committee are doing is getting a group of events together that once we have the ability to go and turn on the faucet safely, we'll be able to get events lined up immediately for everyone. So that's as far as we're going with events. Now, there's another side of this, and that's virtual events, where we can go somewhere and do something on our screens via Zoom. We had a very successful Lawrence Berkeley Labs tour on September 11th, quite enjoyable and informative. And if we can get together more of those, by the way, that was just for SIR. We were able to get a group together for us just for SIR. If we can find any more to do that, we will schedule those and have our sign up through our usual website. But for us, SIRS, I think there's a chance for you to get out and to do a few things. And I have a few things listed here. I know that you could actually go to a virtual tour or a real tour to the San Francisco Zoo, Oakland Zoo, the Oakland Museum, the DeYoung Museum. I Googled virtual tours and I was amazed. The Smithsonian's available, world-class, the Louvre, there are world-class places available if you would like to do that on a virtual tour. And with that, I think we ought to turn it over to Mr. Michael Lee to talk to us about what's going on with our activities. Michael?
Thank you, John. Well, activities on hold are bocce, bridge, dine in and dine out, Friday monthly breakfast, Metropolitan Opera, movies, poker, and travel. The activities meeting on Zoom include the AM Book Club, which will be discussing Anxious People by Frederick Backman on November 2nd. And the Evening Book Club is reading Backman's book, Us Against You, which is the story of a small town ice hockey fanatic. Sounds interesting. Book Club 3 is reading The Life of Andrew Jackson by Robert Remini. Cooking meets virtually for cocktails and yearns to get back together in person. And unfortunately, confusion reigns throughout the fantasy football world as game cancellations, postponements, and reschedules start to become the norm during COVID-19. The STEM group meets monthly via Zoom. This month, they had a presentation on battery technology. And the SIR 128 Wine Fellowship continues to offer a Zoom wine happy hour where they explore different varietals, regions, and countries. Outdoor social distancing activities in full swing are cycling, which has been on 5 rides this month, attended by 44 bikers. The fishing group is still very active as the salmon season winds down. Weather during this time of the year makes it ideal to head under the Golden Gate and north along the Marin coast. Couples golf is set for the Las Positas 9-hole course tomorrow with a bring your own picnic afterwards. 9-hole golf held a best ball scramble tournament with Gary Soto and Dan Cold as the winners. Tuesday, 19-hole golf is scheduled to play Poppy Ridge, San Ramon, Las Positas, Redwood Canyon, and Calliope Preserve through mid-November. The SIR Thursday golf group played Diablo Creek and Bridges golf courses this month. And hiking, which I went on, is doing socially distanced outings wearing masks. Our next hike is October 30th in the Walnut Creek open space, and you see us there behind the fog. Metropolitan Opera reports that movie theaters are beginning to reopen and are showing some of your favorite operas, so check the schedule. Outdoor pickleball areas are open and getting a lot of use in Livermore and Walnut Creek. And tennis has a group of 10 players who start at 7 a.m. on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at Central Park in San Ramon. So for more information about any activity, sign on to the activities page of our website at sir128.com. Now here's Dan Mahoney to introduce our guest speaker. Dan?
Thank you very much. And let me see, I've got to click all my buttons. Okay, so just a reminder, so at the bottom of your screen, you see the chat icon. And if you click that, you can type in your question, and those will go to John, and he can ask those questions of Dave before the end of the presentation. Also, let's see, as you look at this and see, I wanted to say one more thing. I did put in on the Rooster the information on how to get a copy of Dave's book. So if those of you who are interested after the talk can do that. If you don't have a copy of the Rooster, give me a call or an email or something, and I'll get that information out to you. So you'll see a lot of awards and merits for Dave, and those are really great. But one of the great things that I encountered was at a dinner at his house, 35, 40 years ago. There was a number of his POW buddies were there. One of the guys called me aside and said, you don't know who Dave Carey is. I thought, well, I've known him for a little while here, but at any rate, okay. And when to be called aside like that was kind of interesting. So finally he says, I want you to know that the reason I am here and alive today is because Dave Carey got me through 5 years as a POW in Vietnam. I can think of no greater tribute for a person than to get something like that from somebody that said, he got me through it. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Dave Carey to give his presentation on his fun times in Vietnam.
Thank you, Dan. I'm messing with my computer here. Thank you, Dan. I'm delighted to be with you all this morning. I have no idea who might have said that, but those guys were a little flaky, and nonetheless, I'm delighted to be with you this morning. When I have the opportunity to talk about my life, actually in my head, I have a whole list of things that I think I'm going to talk about this morning. I think I talk about how we deal with change, and change is just a fact of life. It's happening all the time. Nobody could have predicted the changes we've seen most recently. I think I talk about how we deal with those kinds of changes. I think I talk about how we get ourselves into the future that's unknown and unknowable. Yeah. I know you're going to tell me what you'll be doing 6 months from now, but if I get out my money clip and want to lay bets, all bets are off. That future is so fragile and so unpredictable. So I think I talk about how we get ourselves into the future. I think I talk about how we communicate or choose to communicate with people around us. I think I talk about how we exercise the influence that we have, and we all have influence. I think I talk about how we get along together, how we work together, both personally and professionally, if any of you are still working. I think I talk, actually, when I start to think about what do I talk about, in my head, this list gets to be longer and longer and longer. And I want to talk about all those things by means of an analogy. An analogy is, this is a little bit of a test. I know you have to think back to English 101. An analogy is a comparison, a story. I'm going to tell you a story this morning. The inference is that somehow we can make some sort of connection between the story I want to tell you and that list of things I started on. Now, I know from experience, I can make a few connections. So believe me, whenever I can remember to do it, I'll try to remember. more interesting to me, I've discovered over the years that you can make a whole lot more connections than I can make. So I'd like for you to hang in there for a little while this morning with this question burning uppermost in your mind. So what? So what do I care what that guy says? Why would I even listen to that guy? So what? I'd like for you to be doing real-time integration. Now, the story goes like this. You know, most of the places where I have an opportunity to speak, I would never think anymore of asking this question. But with this group, I'm pretty confident asking this question. And that question is, how many of you remember the 31st of August, 1967? I know how long ago it was. You know, and I know this is like ancient history here. The 31st of August, 1967 stands out in my mind as though it were etched in crystal. I can look at every detail of it. I can run it forward, back motion, fast action, stop action. The 31st of August, 1967, I was a somewhat younger naval aviator. I was flying an A4 aircraft, just like these ones behind me, off the aircraft carrier Oriskany. We were in the Gulf of Tonkin, about 60 miles from the coast of North Vietnam. The 31st of August, 1967, in the Gulf of Tonkin was one of those gray, hazy days at sea. It was the kind of day when you stand up on the flight deck and look out. There's no horizon. Everything's the same color. Kind of goes from over your head to under your feet. We manned airplanes about 7 o'clock in the morning, launched 18 of them from the ship, rendezvoused overhead, got ourselves organized, pointed the noses toward the coast of North Vietnam. The target that day was a small railroad bridge just inland from the port city of Haiphong. We crossed the beach, they started shooting. They always started shooting. That day, I remember very clearly, they fired in succession among all the other stuff from way out in front of us. They fired 2 surface-to-air missiles. Now, back in the day, a surface-to-air missile was about the size of a small telephone pole. And when they'd launch them, there'd be so much dust and flame kicked up from just getting them off the launch rails that from altitude, we could see them launch them from miles away. And once they had them in the sky, the plume of flame on the booster rocket was so big and so bright, you could just track them as they went through the sky. So I sat in my cockpit that day and I watched the first missile. It was a little bitty point of light sitting on my windshield. And it just sat there. And it got bigger and brighter and bigger and brighter till finally it started to move on the windshield. And as soon as it started to move on the windshield, I knew that it would or would not hit me. I wonder what you think. This is a very important question here. Well, I knew it would not hit me. You know, it's a relative motion kind of problem. It's like when you try to get on the freeway. As long as the cars move relative to each other, there's no problem. It's when there's no relative movement that we have real problems. So that first missile started to move. I knew it wouldn't hit me. I turned my attention to the second missile. It was just a little point of light on the windshield. It got bigger and brighter and bigger and brighter. So finally I decided that if it wouldn't move, I would. And that day I had a brilliant idea. What I decided I would do, rather than go to my left and have to dodge through 16 airplanes that are out here beside me somewhere, I decided to just roll the airplane up on its back, do a big barrel roll over top of the airplane beside me, come down on the outside, press onto the target. And it was a pretty good idea until I was upside down over the airplane beside me. The missile went right between us. So it was a huge explosion. Fireball blew the tail section off my airplane. I didn't know that, by the way. Airplane just stayed on its back, started spinning and tumbling and gyrating and falling through the sky. It was shaking so bad, nothing would focus. When I tried to look at the instrument panel in the cockpit, it was just a blur in there. There was nothing. The stick was real loose. It was like it was not connected to anything in my own. Both rudder pedals were up against the firewall. This thing was wallowing and tumbling and falling through the sky. I had all the flying characteristics of your cell phone. I mean, this thing is coming through the sky like a ton of lead. And I'll tell you this, every time the nose of that airplane go by the water, and for me, the water meant safety, it seemed like it would hesitate. And I would think to myself, this thing is going to fly. And I'd start stirring on that stick and kicking the pedals, and the nose would whip off. Going through 4,000 feet, I got a glimpse of my altimeter, ejected from the airplane, had a parachute, landed in the middle of a small North Vietnamese village. Now, when I first landed, there was nobody around. I don't know where they were. They were wherever they went for air raids. So I got rid of my helmet, my parachute. I ducked out between the hooches and I started running out across the rice paddy. And as I'm running out across the rice paddy, I can look up and I can see those airplanes flying away. So I'm running through, and running's probably not the right word for what goes on in a rice paddy. You know, the mud's about this deep out there. I'm slugging my way through it as best I can. I'm watching those airplanes. I get to about the middle of the rice paddy and I can see that one of those airplanes is turning around and he's going to come back. So I stopped right there. I started digging around in my gear and I dug out a little radio that we carried. Now, this little radio is about the size of maybe two of your cell phones cemented together. And I had this radio in my hands a lot of times. The Navy used to make us get them out every couple of weeks and check the batteries. We used to play with them sometimes on the ship. The point is, I've had this radio in my hands a lot. But now I'm standing out in this rice paddy. I have mud up to the middle of my calves. I'm watching that airplane's coming right straight at me. I got this little radio. For the life of me, I couldn't get that radio turned on. It was like I had all thumbs on both of my hands. I'm watching him and he's getting closer and I'm trying to get this doggone thing to work. And this is not a complicated machine either. It only has two little switches on it, but I can't get the switches in the right sequence. And he get till finally, I tell you, by blind luck, about the time he boomed across the top, I managed to mash down the right combination of buttons on that little radio and it sparked to life. Which allowed me to say, in my very finest airline pilot drawl, somebody come on, I need to get me out of here. I started babbling in that radio and my voice was up about 3 octaves and it was just all gushing out of me. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, this does not sound good. But there was nothing I could do about it. I babbled in that radio, I went on and on. And oh, by the way, I had been trained that it would have been better for me to die than to not sound good on the radios. I mean, this is serious pilot stuff that's going on here. But there was nothing I could do about it. I babbled and babbled and babbled. The best thing that happened was I ran myself out of breath. And when I ran myself out of breath, I had to pause the inhale. When I paused the inhale, I let off one of those buttons on that radio, which allowed Dean to get a word in edgewise. And he said, you know, we cannot come and get you. At which point I couldn't think of anything clever to say. And Dean said, I'll see you when this is over. And he flew away. And I stood out there in the middle of rice paddy. I don't know how to describe it to you. It was like I was the only person in the entire universe. It was just me out there all alone by myself. There was no one. It was, and I don't imagine I have to describe that to you too much because I'm willing to bet money that you've all had times in your life when you get that alone feeling. I mean, stuff happens. Sometimes we got to make a decision. Sometimes you got to stand up and be counted. Sometimes you get the feeling like there ain't nobody, just you all alone by yourself. Well, I wasn't alone for very long, of course. The next thing that happened was I was almost immediately surrounded by about 1 million North Vietnamese. Now, that's exaggeration, huh? There were 840,000 of them. I don't know where they came from. They captured me so fast it'd make your head swim. They drugged me up at rice paddy and they proceeded to tie me up with miles and miles of rope. They had so much rope wrapped around me. There was rope everywhere. And after they'd be all tied up with all this rope, then they decided they want to undress me. And they didn't untie me, but rather they took a machete made out of the leaf spring of a car. And they would reach in between the rope and grab handfuls of my gear and just chop it away. And I had all my flight gear, of course. I had everything. You guys have seen Top Gun. I'm sure you've seen Top Gun. It's un-American to not see Top Gun. Well, you remember the scene in the movie where Tom Cruise and Goose are walking across the tarmac. They're carrying their helmets. They have on G-suits and torso harnesses and all that stuff. That's the way I looked. I was way better looking than Tom Cruise, but that was a few years ago. They cut it away to end up being me and my miles and miles of rope. And that would start from, in my undershorts, and that would start for me what would turn out to be 5.5 years in prison in North Vietnam. The question I most frequently ask about that is this. How did you do that? How could you do that? How were you able to do that? How could you have done that? And that's the question I'd like to talk with you about for a few minutes this morning. How did we do that? Actually, I'd like for you to think about that question. How did we do that? Here, I set the scene for you. I was kept locked up for years in cells that were never quite big enough for a number of people who were in them. On average, I lived with about 6 or 7 or 8 other guys. I've been by myself for a few months. I lived with a group of 20 men one time for a year and a half. But on average, there'd be about 4, 5, 6 of us in one of these cells. A lot of them were cells too. A lot of them were in dungeon-like prisons that the French had built over there in the early 1900s. The kind of things you see in the movies where they got big, high, 15, 18 feet high walls, little air slits up at the top, big, heavy door with a little spy door in it. We slept on the concrete floors or pallets made out of wood or concrete. Some of the pallets had shackles on them. So if they wanted to, they could put you on the pallet, put your ankles across the bar, put the top bar down, padlock you to the pallet. We were interrogated on occasion. We were beaten on rare occasion. We were tortured on very, very rare occasion. We were not allowed to see or have any contact with any Americans outside of our own little cell. They wanted the place to be run, divided up, cell by cell by cell. They believed in divide and conquer, and that's the way they were trying to run this thing. So we weren't allowed to have any communication with anybody outside of our own cell. Can you kind of picture what I'm trying to describe? I'm sure you guys can. You've seen enough movies. You can picture this, groups of Americans locked up in these cells. Well, I said the question I most frequently ask about that is, how did you do that? How were you able to do that? And I have to tell you that in my mind, the answer to that question is really very, very simple. How did we do it? We did what we had to do. We did our best. We grew through that experience. We kept our sense of humor, and we kept the faith. Faith in ourselves, faith in each other, faith in this country, faith in God. See, and I see those things as directly translatable into your lives. I mean, how will you deal with the problems you have? How are you going to handle all the change? How will you get yourself into this unknown and unknowable future? How are you going to deal with the tragedy that's coming in your life? How do you deal with the way you communicate with people around you, with family, with people that are important to you? How do you exercise the influence? How do you do what you have to do? You doing your best? You growing? You keep your sense of humor? You keep the faith? But wait, before I press you too hard, I owe you some answers. How did we do it? Well, the very first thing we decided we had to be able to do, and I don't know how we knew to do this, but somehow we knew that we could not allow ourselves to be isolated in these cells. I mean, their game plan was to keep us all isolated. And we knew, see, I wish I could tell you it was because we were so smart, but I don't believe that. It was like instinct. We could not allow ourselves to be isolated. And so we began to work on that problem. Actually, we could think about that this morning for a few minutes. You have the picture in your head, groups of Americans locked up in these cells. Just picture a few of us locked up in some hotel room somewhere, and the whole hotel's full of other prisoners. We decide we have got to be in touch with each other. Now, so we can think about that. There are many parts to the problem. The first part to the problem is whatever we decide to do had better be very sneaky, because if they catch us doing this, they are going to beat us. So what we decided we could do that would be very, very sneaky would be to go over there and tap very quietly on that wall. That'd be sneaky. Next part of the problem was we had to think of something we could go tap quietly on that wall. So if we got the right answer, we would know immediately that was American. May not be Americans over there. Could be Thai, Laotian, Arvin. Could be our captors sneaking around trying to catch us doing these things so they come beat on us for a while. So we need to think of something we can tap quietly on that wall. So if we get the right answer, we know immediately that's an American. I wonder what you think that sounds like. Some of you probably think it sounds like Morse code. And of course, I knew Morse code. I used to have to take tests on Morse code, and I know telegraphers can do the dot dash thing somehow with that little key, but us thumping on these walls, we were never able to figure out how to thump dots and dashes. You don't want to think too far out. How did we do that? What did it sound like? It sounded like this. Dot, 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 dot. I can tell you if there's an American within 100 miles, they know the answer to that. Dot, dot. If there's somebody been in this country for longer than 6 months, it seems like they know the answer to that. Now, I don't know why that is. I don't know how that works, but somehow it's built into the American psyche. So we go over to the wall and we tap very quietly, dot, 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 and we get the answer, dot, dot. We know he's there. I wonder what you would have done next. Could you picture yourself up against that wall? You've tapped dot, 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 dot. He's answered dot. You know he's there. I wonder what you would have done. How would you start? Well, picture yourself up against the wall. I'm going to start. It goes like this. 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll go all the way to 26 and I'll stop. And I'll start all over again. 1, 1, 2. So that's the way we'll start. We'll start with 1 for the letter A, 2 for the letter B, 3 for the letter C. Hey, this has to be very simple. Some of these guys are in the Marine Corps. Some of them are even in the Air Force, if you can picture all this. So we tap 1 for the letter A, 2 for the letter B, 3. I can't tell you how old it gets. Tap 15 times on that wall to go find the letter O in the alphabet. And not only that, in our alphabet, the really good letters, they're down there towards the end someplace. So the next thing we did was, picture this in your head. We built a 5x5 matrix into which we put the letters of the alphabet. Now, you know, most of you know, maybe not all of you, but most of you know that I have 25 squares and 26 letters I have to deal with. So we use the letter C for the letter K. Now everything will fit. So then you see, so we put them in the matrix. You can picture this: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, right? Then we could tap a number across the top, a number down the side, locate a letter in the matrix. We can go fast. That code was so good. We can go about 30 words a minute. We were the original text messengers. That is probably why we never bothered to figure out how to do Morse code on the walls, because we had this thing and it worked so well. And you could do it wherever. If they would take you outside, give you the bamboo broom and tell you to sweep down the walkway in between the buildings, you can sweep in the code. See, it sound like this. It was like being on a radio. Everybody listened. The whole world was out there. You could tell jokes, whatever you wanted to do. And then if they took us out, didn't give us a bamboo broom, we did it with body noises. Not the kind of body noises some of you are thinking about, but rather it'd sound like this. And we'd cough and sputter and spit. You get in the punchline to your joke. How'd we do it? The first thing we did, always, was worked out this communications problem. And I want to commend that to your thinking. So I don't know you guys. I don't know how it is with you. I'm going to tell you what I do know. What I know is this: if there's a communications problem anywhere in your life, with family, with friends, at work, anywhere in your life, I know who has to fix it. You do. And if you don't fix it, it's not going to get fixed. Can nobody fix it for you? If there's any kind of communications problem, you have to fix it. And I also want to tell you this morning that I think the analogy between the story I want to tell and your work in your lives is really very, very good. This is super good. See, here we are. We're locked up in these cells. They want us to be cut off, isolated, out of touch with each other. Here you are, where you live and work, some of you maybe still. Now, let me tell you, there's no plan to cut you off, isolate you, get you out of touch, disconnect you. But I know when I start asking the question like, hey, how easy is it for you to start to feel like you're disconnected? Like somehow you're losing contact with people that are important to you, that people you care for. How easy is it for us to start to feel disconnected? It's so easy. Why should we be concerned about that where we were? Well, for starters, if we're going to do anything on any kind of scale larger than a few people locked up in a room, we've got to be able to communicate. If we're going to get organized here, figure out who's in charge, how do we take care of each other, what are we supposed to be doing, anything on any kind of scale, we've got to be able to communicate with each other. Why should you be concerned about it where you are? Quite frankly, I think the answers are the same. They're exactly the same. How difficult was that process where we were? It was hard. I used to have a callus on my knuckle, was about 3/8 of an inch deep from tapping on that wall. And some days, if they'd want to mess with us, they'd come around, make us hold out our hands. If you had calluses on your hands, you get knocked around for a little while. Now, I thought that'd be okay on very rare occasion, rather than every day for hours lay on that filthy floor trying to look under that door. Because if I'm up here tapping on this wall and none of my cellmates goofing off, we are in this together and we are taking care of each other. They've got their eyes and ears pressed to the cracks in the shutters. They're laying for hours on these filthy floors trying to listen for footsteps. It was just a very difficult process. So I think the analogy is pretty good between the story I want to tell and your lives. How do we do it? First thing we did always was worked out the communications process. Second thing we did, just the way you would have done it if you had been there, was we worked out the entertainment schedule. Now, here's the way we used to do that. We used to have cell meetings. We always had 100% attendance at our meetings. And at those meetings, we would talk about movie stars, books, authors. It'd be enough for you to let slip that the last book you had read was Hunger Games. We'll schedule you to tell us Hunger Games. Hey, we could do it whenever. Next week, next month, 6 months from now. We're into long-range planning in this place. So the process would be you talk to all your cellmates, find out who read Hunger Games, who saw Hunger Games, who knew anything about Hunger Games, go tap a message on the wall. Eventually, you knew everything anybody knew about Hunger Games. Then you'd go sit in the corner for however long you wanted, fill in the blank spots in the story. The appointed night would come and you would tell us a story. I received an Academy Award. It was for Dr. Zhivago. After I'd been there for years and moved from cell to cell and prison to prison, I moved in with this group of 20 men. I think I mentioned my reputation preceded me. They wanted to know, when can you tell us Zhivago? I said, anytime. So we scheduled it for, back then, you'll remember, what was Sunday night at the movies. And I had 3 men. They sat over here, and when I would nod my head, they would start up with Laura's theme. I told Zhivago in the first person. I was Alec Guinness, the brother, out there searching for the lost daughter. I don't know how many of you remember that. It took me 5.5 hours, at the end of which there was a spontaneous standing ovation. They gave me the Oscar right there on the spot. How do we do it? We did what we had to do. We did our best. We decided we were going to grow through that experience. We were going to learn something. We weren't going to vegetate there. We were going to come out of there smarter than we went in. And so we then began to teach each other everything we had ever learned. I learned to play piano when I was in prison. I lived with a fellow who had taken piano lessons when he was a child, and we're sitting around now in prison, and John, we decided I should learn to play the piano. So we took toilet paper, we glued it all together with rice. We took ashes and dirt, we drew a keyboard on it. John taught me how to read the keyboard. He taught me how to read music. He taught me all the little finger exercises that go along with playing the piano. I used to practice faithfully. And on Sundays, I would give concerts. So I would take my piano, I would spread out on the floor in my end of that cell. I have played the most beautiful music in the world, and I have most certainly played with more enthusiasm than anyone's ever played. My cellmates, they loved it, of course. Well, if they didn't like what I was playing, they could listen to something else, and I'd just keep playing, and they'd love everything I played. You know, in the intervening years since I've been home, I did seat myself in front of a real piano. I don't know what was wrong with that piano. You know, it wasn't anything like it was in my head. In my head, it is absolutely beautiful. It's perfect. I understand it. I know how to read music. I cannot get it to come out the ends of my fingers. And I find a lot of things to be like that. Maybe you do too. Do you ever notice how perfect things are in your head? And then, of course, we have to get them out of our heads, and things go downhill from there. I mean, everything seems to be that way. There are all kinds of examples of it. Um, like this communications process I was talking about. I mean, how clear is it in your head? You know what you're thinking, why you're thinking it, why you know what your motivation is, you know everything. And then of course you have to get it out of here and over to somebody else, and it just goes downhill. I raised children. Many of you I know have raised children. I raised 2 children. In my mind, I knew how to raise perfect children. I had no idea what was going on at home. Things are just that way. They're perfect up here, and then it's a downhill run from there. Speaking of perfect, I tell you a perfect example. I told you when Dan introduced me that I was delighted to be with you guys this morning. Now, it's very hard for me to explain that to you, how excited I am to be here with you today. Because you see, this morning, in this little bitty period of time, I'm going to have an opportunity, have a positive impact on your lives. See, I've been thinking about this last night, this morning in the shower. I'm going over lines. I'm adding lines in. I'm throwing lines out. I'm trying to get my act together. I'm trying to, and I want you to know this. Hey, I'm trying to shrink down 5.5 years of my life into something we could talk about for a few minutes. Would touch on the so what question. And I want you to know this. No matter what happens on these screens today, in the shower this morning, it was perfect. See, things are just that way. They're perfect in our heads. We were going to grow through that experience. We were going to learn stuff. It would have been enough over there for you to let slip you had taken a biology course. We would make you the biology professor. Same process as the movies, really. Talk to everybody, find out what they knew about leaves, twigs, bugs, worm. Eventually, you'd be teaching a biology course. I was a French professor. The way that happened was this. They came in one day and they took 2 of us out, and they split us up, and they began to beat on us. And they told us, they had a guard listening outside that door, and he heard us talking about things we weren't allowed to talk about. Well, 6 weeks later, when they threw the 2 of us back in the cell, the roommates want to know, what's going on? What's going on? So you won't believe this. They're listening outside these doors. They don't understand English very well. And we're getting pounded for what they think we're saying. So we came to the only logical conclusion, which was we would quit speaking English. What we decided to speak was French, not Pig Latin, French. I had let slip that I had taken 2 years of French in high school and 2 years in college, and my roommates decided we're going to speak French. It didn't matter, mind you. I didn't learn anything in those 4 years. So I had to quick go tap a message on the wall, say, I'm now the French instructor. I need French words, send me vocabulary, and I began to teach French. I taught French for years. By the time we came back to the United States, I had 6 men, absolutely fluent in the French language, according to me. Well, there's some problems with that language. I had to make some stuff up, but you should have heard them speak it. So how do we do it? We did what we had to do. We did our best. We decided we were going to grow through that experience. We remembered and memorized everything. I am completely convinced that everything you have ever been exposed to is recorded. The only question is you going to get it. Everything's up there. We put it in and day out. We've got it. It's all up there. You would be astounded what all you have in your head. It was important for us, for example, to be able to name in chronological order every teacher you ever had in your life, or come up with the name of every student in your 4th grade homeroom. So it's all up there. You would be totally amazed what you're carrying around in your head. You would just be absolutely amazed. For example, when they first took me to Hanoi, they began to interrogate me, and they wanted to know some things. I wanted to tell them my name, rank, serial number, date of birth. Well, they really wanted to know some things. And what happened was the interrogations led to beatings, the beatings led to torture. And we got to the point where I hurt so badly, the pain was so great that I knew I had to do something to try to stop this. I knew that I was concerned because even as a junior officer, I had my little bitty share of military secrets. And I thought, if I'm crazy, there's no telling what I'll say to these people. And I was right on the razor's edge of going crazy. And so I decided what I would do is hold out as long as I possibly could and lie. And that's what happened. We got to the point where I hurt so bad, the pain was so great, I started lying. I lied about everything you can possibly imagine. I lied and lied and lied and lied. And I'd like to be able to tell you it took weeks. It didn't take weeks. I don't know. It took a couple of days. I lose some track of time in there. I just know I hurt so bad. I had to try to do something to stop it. I started lying. I lied about everything you can imagine. I lied and lied and lied. The interrogators, of course, keep track of everything. Interrogators are a lot like bosses or spouses. See, this will not be totally unfamiliar to you. They keep track of everything. And so I'm lying about everything. Finally, they got done with me and they left. Now, I'll try to describe this to you. I don't know how to tell you about how I hurt. I couldn't get up off the floor. My arms didn't work anymore. My arms didn't work for weeks. I ate by wiggling around in my stomach, stick my face in a bowl of rice. The pain was absolutely incredible. But worse than the pain was in my head. It's the only time that I've ever been like this in my life where I could not pick a subject and think about it. It was though I didn't have any control anymore. It's just crazy, mind out of control things flashing around in my head, like my home in Jeanette, or the dog I had when I was a kid, or the first car I bought, or just out of control stuff flashing through my head. Into my mind came the first line of the 23rd Psalm. And that line kept coming into my head. And I didn't want to think about it either, but I discovered kind of by hit or by miss that if I would think about that line, I could think about that line. Well, my mama didn't raise any dummies. I started thinking about that line. Now, I had learned the 23rd Psalm when I was a little bitty guy in Sunday school. And over the years, I had been adrift. I had been so far adrift. But that line was there. And I could think about that line. I worked on it for days and days and days until from somewhere in the back of my head, I dredged up the whole 23rd Psalm. And I discovered once I had done that, I had control of my mind back. Now, I most certainly don't think that was any accident. There was the word of God planted in my head so that when I would be so desperate, it would be there. I mean, you know, scripture tells us over and over and over again that God is faithful. Not you, not me. God is faithful. And there was the word of God when I needed it. Everything's in your head. It's all up there. You'd be astounded what you could remember if I took you to the bathroom in your house there and locked you in for a year. You'd be amazed what you have in your head. It's all up there. Everything's there. See, and oh, by the way, I think that's the answer to some of the problems that we worry about. I mean, for example, why should we be concerned about how many bloody acts of violence our children, our grandchildren watch on all these screens? I'll tell you why. Because it's going in. What's going in is getting stored. What's getting stored is somehow going to flavor character in life. There's no way around it. Everything is in there. What's the problem with pornography? I'll tell you the problem with pornography. It's going in. What's going in is getting stored. What's getting stored is going to somehow flavor character, life. There's no way around it. Everything is up in our heads. Everything is there. And we need to be very careful what we put up there. We need to pay attention to it. It's all there. We had a fellow who lived with us who, when he was a child, his parents used to insisted that every year he He had to memorize a poem which he would then recite at the annual family Thanksgiving dinner. He hated it, of course, but now, years later, we're sitting around in jail. Norm's able to recall great quantities of poetry. We get a message come tap through the wall say, Norman is working on The Highwayman. He's stuck on the line that comes after, plaiting a dark red love knot into her long black hair. Who can help? We love to get those messages. Well, we didn't, for starters, it didn't matter if we knew anything about the Highwayman. Norm was working hard over there and we wanted to help. So we just start making up lines and sending them to Norm. And eventually through the wall, at that line at a time would come the Highwayman, and we'd memorize it as it came. We had huge quantities of material memorized. Some of the things we memorized for the beauty of the words. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there's been some mistake. The only other sound's the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep. Miles to go before I sleep. Miles to go before I sleep. Some of the things we memorized for the sound of the words. You may talk of gin and beer when you quartered safe out here, when sent the penny fire author shot it. But when it's time for slaughter, you'll do your work on water and lick the bloomin' boots of him what's got it. Now, Ninja Sunny Clime, when I used to spend my time in the service of Her Majesty the Queen, of all our black-faced crew, the finest man I knew was the regimental beastie, Gangadine. Some of the things we memorized had great significance for us. Maybe the way things go, some days they would have significance for you. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve their term long after they are gone, so go on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hang on. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not whined or cried aloud. Under the bludgeoning of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul, leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I suppose it was natural, since we were so enamored with those kinds of things, that we would try to write some poetry ourselves. I wrote a poem in French. I'm hoping that none of you speak French. First verse, je me demande comment dit-on tu es le monde de moi, parce que je veux dire cette chaussure à toi, autant de moi. It was perfect, in case you wonder. I have a good friend. I remember when he wrote his first poem. It was after the first meal of the day. Jerry took a bite out of a hunk of bread. He looked down and he started his first poem. Went like this. Little weevil in my bread, I think I just bit off your head. It kind of went downhill from there, but at least it got him started. How do we do it? We laughed a lot. See, laughter was our coping mechanism. It was the way we dealt with all the pressure in our lives. It was the way we tried to keep things in some sort of perspective. It was, I wonder how you do that. Wonder how you cope with all the pressure in your life. Wonder how you keep things in some sort of perspective. I wonder how you deal with it all. See, I'll tell you something else I learned in prison. I know clearly, unequivocally, beyond the shadow of any doubt, who's responsible for the coping and balance in your life. You are. And if you don't take care of it, your life's going to get messed up. It's so easy to mess our lives up. It's easy. How easy are you supposed to be? Drink yourself into a bottle. Pretty easy, I think. How easy is it for us to ruin relationships that are important to us? Pretty easy, I think. See, somehow we've got to deal with all this. We've got to keep things in some sort of perspective. We've got to cope with all the pressure. I'll tell you something else I learned in prison. I found out that I don't have to do that alone. I learned that the Lord God, creator of the universe, cares about me, and he cares about you. See, we don't have to do this all by ourselves, but somehow we've got to do it. Our coping mechanism largely was laughter. We had a fellow went to interrogation. The interrogator wanted to know, in your country, where's your family live? He told him, Kansas. He said, what do your family do? He said, they're farmers. He said, well, what do your family grow? He told him they grow updog. So later on that day, they took him back to his cell, and the interrogator come over to our cell, and the little spider opens up, bang, and there stands the elf. We have names for these people. And the elf wants to know, what's up, Doc? What's up, Doc? What's up, Doc? He keeps saying it over and over again. What's up, Doc? What's up, Doc? It doesn't make a lick of sense. And then he gets his head jammed in that hole, and his veins are standing out. He's spitting all over himself. Yeah. Probably now you could identify a lot more closely with interrogators, bosses, spouses. See, it's not good for these people to get upset. He demands to know what's up, Doc. We're saying, oh, give us a hint, give us a hint. Finally, he says, up, Doc, you know, grows on a farm in Kansas. We said, oh, up, Doc, yeah, it's about this high. We taught him everything there is to know about up, Doc. We give him the recipe for up, Doc bread, whatever he wanted to know, we were teaching. How do we do it? We did what we had to do. We did our best. We chose to grow through that experience. We kept our sense of humor. And we kept the faith. Faith in ourselves, faith in each other, faith in this country, faith in God. We kept the faith in ourselves. See, I see that as directly translatable into every one of your lives. Faith in yourselves. Faith in yourselves no matter what. Faith, they can't make it too tough for you. Faith in yourselves. Faith in ourselves to be able to stand on our feet and say, this is right and this is wrong and this is where I stand. Faith in ourselves to be able to make decisions we have to make. Faith in ourselves no matter what. We did it through faith in each other. I've lived with men who, if they didn't hold my life in their hands, they held the next best thing to it, and I knew they'd do the best that they could do. And when the situation was reversed, they granted that to me, that I would do the best that I could do. And it's that kind of faith and confidence in each other that allows us to live together, exist together, work together, be together effectively. It's all built on a foundation of trust and confidence. We did it through faith in this country. We live in the greatest nation that has ever existed on the face of the earth. This is a land of freedom. This is a land of achievement. This is a land of opportunity. This is the land they're kicking the doors down trying to get in. Don't you believe otherwise for a second? This is the land. Problem is, you and I are buried in what's wrong with this land. We are inundated with what's wrong with our country. You turn on the news, you'll hear so much about what's wrong with our country. You'll be lucky if you hear anything about what's right with our country. And that is so warped and so out of perspective. I did it through faith in God. I was never alone over there. I've lived with men who profess to be atheist and agnostic. I believe it was more difficult for them. I don't think that was any accident. I think sometimes we get so busy with all the stuff of our lives. We get so busy collecting the toys. We get so caught up in all everything going on around us. The truth of the matter is this: you and I have been blessed. That's it. I mean, how do you account for it? How do you account for all that you have? How do you account for the way you live? Why are you not a Syrian refugee? Why are you not starving in Darfur? Why? There's no accounting for it. We've been blessed. And I know as clearly as I'm looking at you on this screen, I don't deserve it. And I don't know you, but I saw some of you checking in, and I've decided you don't deserve it either. See, we've just been blessed. How do we do it? We did what we had to do. We did our best. We chose to grow through that experience. We kept our sense of humor and we kept the faith. What could be learned from my experience? Let me suggest only one thing to you. All of my experience teaches me, that no matter what happens to us in our lives, we've been given the ability to choose how we're going to deal with it. We've been given the ability to choose our attitudes. See, my questions would sound a lot better if I ask them like this. How will you choose to get yourself into the future? How will you choose to deal with your problems? How will you choose to deal with the tragedies coming in your life? How will you choose to communicate with the people around with you? How do you choose to exercise the influence you have? It's all a matter of choice. All of my experience teaches me that it's all a matter of choice. How will you choose? How do you choose to ride out this COVID thing? How do you choose? In A Tale of Two Cities, Charles Dickens wrote, "'Twas the best of all times and the worst of all times." He's absolutely right. This is the best of all times. For you to be who you are, being a member of SIR 128, living where you're living up there, doing what you're doing. And oh, by the way, this is the worst of all possible times. For you to be who you are, living up there where you're living, being a member of SIR, do it. It is. And which it is up to us. Well, let me be perfectly clear. Which it is entirely up to you. It is entirely up to you. So, as this whole meeting winds down eventually this morning, and as you go back about your lives, I would always urge you to choose to make it the best of all times. The best of all times. Now, I'm about out of airspeed, altitude, and ideas all at the same time. I know there may be some questions. I'm happy to try to answer questions. It works pretty well, actually. You make up questions, I make up answers, and we can do that before you wrap up your meeting or after you wrap up your meeting. Joe, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Good. Thanks, Dave. On behalf of the SIR branch, I got one word to say. Wow. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing your insights on your experience, and thank you for sharing what was obviously a very emotional memories. And excellent, Dave. Thank you. And I do have a couple of questions. And while you were in Hanoi, Jane Fonda made a controversial visit there that raised a lot of eyebrows here in the States. And can you talk a little bit about what went on during her visit, or were you part of that?
No, fortunately, I was not part of that, but she did come over there, and some people were beaten to go see her, and she, well, the short version is this. I don't have much use for Jane Fonda, on the one hand. On the other hand, we live in a free country, and we did not declare war in Vietnam. Had we declared war, it would have been an entirely different matter. So she's free to say whatever she wants to say or do whatever she wants to do, just as you are and just as I am. Very unfortunately in our country, and much more so even now than it was back then, if you attain celebrity status of some sort, people ascribe to you then all sorts of wisdom, which is absolutely ridiculous. So she made some very serious mistakes. I did like it, by the way, when they had her picture in all the urinals at March Air Force Base. But you know, it's a free country.
Dave, did you hear anything at all about what was going on in the real world while you were in captive?
Yes, we did. In a number of ways. For one way was they kept shooting guys down. So there was always a little trickle of information coming in. It might be a year old by the time it got to you, but there was always a little trickle of information coming in. The interrogators made certain to tell us a whole lot of the stuff that was going on in the United States and the issues over the war in Vietnam. And lastly, we, for maybe about half to 2/3 of the time I was over there, we had a radio speaker in our cell. Now, when I say that, you picture I go out to your car and rip the radio speaker out of the back seat and put a couple wires on it, and then I throw it in the air hole with a wire that leads back to the head shed, wherever that is. And they would play over that speaker everything anti-war, anti-American that happened, in the United States. We would hear about it. They would play The Voice of Vietnam in English, which was a broadcast out of Hanoi to our troops down south, a propaganda broadcast. And they would play confessions that they had tortured out of us. And so we pretty much knew what was going on. I mean, certainly not firsthand, like if we had been back in the States, but we knew that it was all of that was going on.
Okay.
I might say something else about that. Admiral Stockdale, Jim Stockdale was a senior naval officer over there. For a long time, he was a senior officer, but he was always a senior naval officer. And he sent us a message one day and said, "Who knows what Epictetus said?" And of course, we go, duh, we don't know anything about Epictetus. Who's he? And it turns out Epictetus was a Greek philosopher back around Aristotle and Plato and all that time. And he had said, this is paraphrased, don't worry about stuff you got no influence over, no control over. And so Admiral Stockdale told us, he said, that's what he said. Don't worry about stuff you don't have any influence over. You can't control, you have no impact on. He said, you guys quit worrying about what's going on in the United States. You worry about how you conduct yourselves here, how you behave with each other, how you talk to each other, and don't get all wrapped around the axle about stuff where you have no influence and absolutely minimal information. And I always thought that was the greatest words of wisdom. I mean, as a matter of fact, quite frankly, I almost think about it daily with the situation that's going on in our country. I don't have any influence over that. I'll cast my vote, I'll write a letter, but beyond that, I'm not paying any attention to it. There's nothing I can do to it. I'm not getting wrapped up about it.
Dave, if you don't mind sharing, what obstacles did you have to overcome after your release, and how long did it take? I know it's ongoing, but how long did it take you to get back to normalcy?
It took no time. A couple of things about that. One is what I would now tell you in retrospect when I look back on that and think about us in those cells. I mean, here we are. You just picture this: a bunch of guys locked up 24/7, 365. You can talk about anything you want, and you can talk about it for as long as you want. And then when you get done with it, you can go back and start all over again because we had time. So now I would tell you, I never would have thought of these words at the time, but now I would tell you, I think in those cells, we were doing group therapy.
Good
and
point.
So by the time we came back, we had processed everything over and over and over again. And the vast majority of the ex-POW group just hit the decks running. They were ready to go. The doctors down in Pensacola who have studied us, we're like lab rats, they're studying us, would tell you that the vast majority of the ex-POWs from Vietnam did not just survive that experience, they thrived on it. And they have a whole list of reasons why they would tell you that was. So it was you know, as for example, I was married 6 weeks after I was home. Now, Karen and I had either been engaged or almost engaged, depends on whose story you would listen to. And she waited, and we'd have been married a lot faster than 6 weeks if I had anything to do with it. But, you know, she wanted to wait and see if I started twitching or what was wrong with me. And I held it together for 6 weeks. We got married. It was too late. 6 months after we were released, I was back in the cockpit flying. And I flew for the next 10 years out of Miramar in San Diego. And then I had another tour after that before I retired and went into business for myself. But I have never had a nightmare. I have no, I just have, and all the guys I know, none of them have issues. Now that's not to say that we didn't have a few people that had some issues. I mean, we had 2 guys that committed suicide. And we had a few people, we have a number of people who've had issues, but not anything like you would expect out of that group.
Thank you, Dave. Can you describe how you were notified about your release?
Mm-hmm. Sure. When President Nixon sent Henry Kissinger to negotiate to end the United States involvement in Southeast Asia and the withdrawal, part of that whole deal was that there would be a prisoner exchange. Part of that whole deal was that they had to tell us, and so they did. We didn't believe them at first because they always were jerking us around. But the food got way better. You know, I probably gained 25 pounds or 30 pounds the last 6 or 8 weeks I was there. The food got way better. And one day they came and they divided us up into 4 groups. We would be released by order of longevity in Hanoi. And one day they drove a bus up and dressed us in civilian clothes and put us on the bus, drove us out through Hanoi to Jialam, the airport in Hanoi. And there was the United States Air Force C-141 sitting on the runway. At which point we didn't need an airplane to fly. And we went through a little checkout line, got on the airplane. We all held our breath waiting for it to take off. And when that thing lifted off, there's no way for me to explain the euphoria. It was awesome. They flew us to Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. We were there for 4 or 5 days, got uniforms, saw the doctors, the shrinks, the chaplains, everybody. Got a debriefer attached to us who would go with us for a few weeks, recording everything. And then they flew us back in the United States. Karen was, this gal I mentioned, was working in Alameda, and so I asked to be flown to Travis Air Force Base in north of San Francisco there, and I was attached to Oaknall, Naval Hospital at Oaknall, and the Navy flew my family to the West Coast for a couple of weeks.
Wow. We've had several questions that came in saying basically the same thing, and that's, have you been back to Vietnam or to Hanoi since your release? And can you please describe to us how that felt?
I haven't been back. I haven't been back, so I can't describe to you how it felt. But I know a lot of guys that have been back, and it doesn't seem to be any big shakes to me. So I think when I'm thinking about spending my money, there are other places in the world I'd rather go see. It just doesn't seem to be a big deal to me to go back there. And I don't know that it's been a big deal for any of the guys I know. So I don't know.
Dave, did you ever get to the point that you felt that you weren't going to make it while you were in captivity, and how'd you deal with that?
Well, I told you about when I was initially inducted into the prison system over there, and they tortured me. And when I tell you I had no control over my head, I mean I had no control. It was the scariest thing that I've ever been through in my life. But you heard me say, you know, God is faithful. God is absolutely faithful. I mean, I learned that. It was like, you know, an epiphany. All of a sudden I realized, you know, all this stuff that my mom and dad talked about, and, you know, being a kid in Sunday school and was real. It was real. And so from that point forward, I was never alone. If you said to me, okay, Dave, what's the most important thing from your experience? I would tell you it's my relationship with my God.
Good.
There's no, there's nothing that's close second. Probably on down the line, the second is the next best thing was that for most of the time I was not alone. I lived with other guys. It's hard. It's hard to live alone, especially under those kind of circumstances.
Good. Well, Dave, thank you so much for, first off, thank you for your service and what you've done, and also sharing your thoughts with us. And it's greatly, greatly appreciated. We've got this suitable for framing on your wall, this certificate of appreciation that we will make sure that you get, Dave. And again, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your thoughts and memories. That was very, very emotional. Thank you. And we're going to keep the meeting open. And we're going to have it. We have about 5 more minutes here. We'll keep it open, and then you're certainly welcome to stay with us and chat with us, or if you feel like, and answer more questions.
Sure.
So again, Dave, thank you so much.
My pleasure, John. I'll be happy to stick around.
Good. Thanks, Dave. And now you get the experience of listening to our own Kate Smith with the Golden Pipes that we generally end our meeting with. And Mike Phelan, it's all yours, buddy. God bless America.
Unmute, Mike.
You're muted, Mike.
Good. Okay. How's that?
Good.
Can you hear me now? Sorry.
Go for it. It's all yours.
Okay. Dave, thank you again. I'm honored to be able to sing this song, God Bless America, following that scintillating presentation. Thank you so much. While the storm clouds gather far across the sea, let us swear allegiance to a land that's free. Let us all be grateful for a land so fair, as we raise our voices in a solemn prayer. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Okay, now we come to our monthly raffle drawing, and we picked 3 winners from a very, very sophisticated selection system that was designed and developed by my 4-year-old grandchild. And the winners of this month's $25 drawing, excuse me, that was last month. There we go. Bob Dennison. Congratulations, Bob. Niall Runge, Hope I pronounced that correctly. And Peter Garcia. So congratulations, guys. You'll get $25 checks in the mail soon from our treasurer, Gerald Sir. So, okay, guys, that's it. We'll see you at the next Zoom meeting on November 18th. And thanks for joining us. And if you want, stay on. Everybody's mic will be open, and Dave is going to stay with us for a while, and you can ask him questions directly. Thanks, guys. Okay, go for it.
Just back to everybody.
How do you get out of here?
Dave, I'm just gonna say what everybody else is gonna say. Amazing, 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 and inspirational. I feel sad that my time of service was keeping the trattorias in Italy safe for democracy when I hear what you went through, what you did for your country. I wish you could go and do or tour all the high schools around here and talk to these kids about the real world and what's out there, because I think a lot of them are in dream world from living the life of what they think television tells them life is all about.
Thank you.
Dave,
I've had the,
one of the stories that you've told in the past, I think is kind of interesting, was I know you were being tortured and you were trying to remember the leaders of the ship. You had to tell them the captain of the ship and what you did about that. I think it'd be kind of fun for them.
yeah, they wanted to know all kinds of things, and they wanted to know the names of everybody on the ship or in my squadron. And back at that time, I knew the Pittsburgh Pirates lineup. I'm from right outside of Pittsburgh, and so I started with Captain Roberto Clemente and went from there. Somewhere that's preserved in some retired Vietnamese military officer's little notebook.
Did you ever see the fellow Dean when it was all over?
Yeah, I did see Dean. The first time I saw him. So I mentioned that 6 months after I was released, I was back in the cockpit flying, and in order to do that, I had to go through a flight refresher down in Texas. And part of the flight refresher was we had to go back for carrier qualifications again. And so they sent us to a carrier off the East Coast, and we were qualifying on it. And one night, for I don't know why reasons, they didn't keep us all aboard the ship, but they sent us all to Oceana, which is a Navy base in Virginia. And so we all go to Virginia, a bunch of us, and take care of the airplanes, and then we head right for the officers club and have a beer. So we're all hanging on the bar having a beer, and I hear this voice behind me across the room say, Dave Carey, is that you? And I turn around, and there was Dean. And so we stumble through, and we're loving on each other, and we finally sit down, and we're having a pitcher of beer, and Dean is totally distraught over how badly he felt leaving me down that rice paddy. I mean, he is just going on. And I kept saying, Dean, come on, man, there was nothing you could do. There's no way to get a helicopter in there. You don't need to feel bad about that. Come on. But he was just over and over. And finally I said, Dean, think about this. Now you're up in that airplane and you're going back to the ship to have a milkshake.
Good. How you doing?
I'm down here in this rice paddy. You don't know what bad feels like. Get over it. And no. Well, okay.
What percent of the people made it back, and what percent didn't?
Yeah, that's a good question. Even to this day, there's something like 1,500 Americans unaccounted for from Vietnam. I don't know exactly the answer to that. What I do know is that when we engage in conflict, people disappear. There are something like 8,000 and some Americans unaccounted for from Korea. And there's somewhere upwards of 42,000 something Americans unaccounted for from World War II. So it's not unusual for people to disappear. As far as from the POW ranks, everybody that ever got into the system somewhere that we had contact with is accounted for. Now, there's still people that are unaccounted for, but they never made it into the system. We never we managed to get connected to them, you know. And of our number, we lost 18 guys. What would happen over there was if you got sick, really sick, they would disappear you. And if you got better, you would show up back somewhere in the system. If you didn't get better, they died. And so those 18 guys were in the system for various reasons, various illnesses, ended up in disappearing. And over the years, their remains have been accounted for. They are accounted for. We have their remains. So, other questions? Hi, Shelley.
Dave.
Yes.
How come, well, I see in the background that you flew the A4. How come we never heard much about the A4 and everything we heard about was the F4, the Phantom?
Well, simply put, James, it was because with the F4, they proved that with enough power, you could fly a barn door. I don't know. I was steeped in the A4. That's quite frankly, that's all I ever flew for a whole 20 years in the Navy. Not well, with 15 years, not counting those 5. All I ever flew were A4s. So it was a great airplane. It didn't have too many moving parts. It didn't have too much stuff on it. You know, a guy like me could fly it.
Dave, I apologize for playing name game, but one of my good friends from all the way back in college flew A4s out of Miramar in that same era. Did you ever run into Steve Childs? No, it doesn't sound like it rings.
That doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah, no worries. Just curious. Thanks for what you did. I'm an old Marine. We were, even though you were flying up north, your counterparts over our head, I owe my life to you, and your counterparts, and I'm very grateful for the risks you guys took.
Yeah.
Hi, Dave. Great presentation, great memories. Glad you're back. Thanks so much for your service.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dave, could you tell us the name of your book and a little bit about that so you can put a plug in?
Okay.
Yeah, the name of my book is The Ways We Choose. It's supposed to be available on Amazon and anywhere. It's also on my website. I have a website that's just davecarey.com. And those books that go through my website come out of my office. And so I write notes in them and sign them, you know. It really is my story expanded is really all it amounts to. There, as you can imagine, when I try to cover 5.5 years, there's a lot of other stuff involved. But so yeah, no, I'd love to have it. I never thought I'd be an author, you know. And quite frankly, I'm not an author. I'm a speaker, and I just wrote what I speak and blew it up. So.
Hey, Dave, prior to the shoot down, how many missions had you flown?
James, that's a good question. I think I was pushing close towards 100. I'm not sure. I've never gone back to my logbook and counted them. I had been to Vietnam at the end of August, September, October of 66.
Oh,
And in 66, we had a fire on the Oriskany,
yes.
which ended that cruise. So then we came back and went through a cycle and then went back in June of 67. So I keep thinking I should get my logbooks are right up there. I should get them down and count them up, but I never have. So
You were on board for the fire.
yes, I was.
Oh, man.
That was another whole story. I was trapped below decks for about 5 hours or 5.5 hours in that fire. That's a whole nother story. It was horrendous.
No kidding. I worked with a sailor who was on the Oriskany during that fire.
Oh,
He had some terrible stories.
Oh man, it was something else.
Dave,
sir.
pardon me, could you give us a timeline of when you started in the service and how all this took place and when you were released?
Sure. I grew up outside of Pittsburgh. I went to the Naval Academy. I graduated from there in the class of 1964.
64, okay.
I went right from there into flight training. I got my wings in March of 66. And I was assigned to go fly A4s, and I made, just as I just said, I joined the ship on the line at the end of August 1966 and flew off the line until I think the fire was the 12th or the 24th of October or something like that. Then came back and went to Lemoore in California, went through a cycle, went back to Vietnam. I was shot down the end of August 67. I was released in March of 73. And by January of 74, I was back at Miramar flying A4s again.
Wow.
And then I flew out of Miramar for 10 years. And in the process had command of a couple of squadrons. My last job was at the Naval Amphibious School down in Coronado, down on the south end of Coronado. And I had command of the school, and I also taught a leadership and management program for PCOs and PXOs. I retired in January of 86.
Well,
thank you.
Cool.
Anybody have any other things you come to mind, Dave, you'd like to share with us? If we haven't done any questions from the peanut gallery.
That's really a loaded question, John. I'm happy to talk about whatever folks would like to talk about. I mean, I even talk about stuff I don't know anything about lots of times. So
That just means you're one of the group.
That's right. Yeah.
Do you come in contact with air people who have been through the Gulf Wars? You know, in the years 2000. And is there any mode of comparison between the situations, or was one? Are they different, or are there a lot of similarities?
Yeah, I don't know. Interestingly, I haven't had a lot of opportunity to speak to service folks. I've had some. I mean, I've been speaking for 30 years, so I have had opportunities, but not a ton of them. So I don't know enough to make comparisons. You know, I've been busy, just like everybody. I get busy with my own life and my own stuff, and I don't know enough to make comparisons. I could tell you a couple things. One is, you know, I when I have the opportunity to speak to young people or to service folks, I really try to hammer on the idea that I'm really not any different than they are. You know, that we're all way more resourceful, tougher, however you want to think of it, than we ever give ourselves credit for. It's just that I've been put in the situation so that I know that beyond a shadow of a doubt. And most of the folks I have the opportunity to talk to haven't been put in the press like that. I'm absolutely convinced that we're all way stronger than we ever give ourselves credit for. I will tell you this also, this is my opinion. I think that we as a country do our service folks a great disservice. I think that there is an understanding now. Somebody's got a radio on. I think that there is an understanding now, or a feeling now, that we're going to send these folks over to wherever, Afghanistan or wherever they go, and they're probably going to get screwed up. And so they come back screwed up. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And not only that, we've built a whole industry around it, which isn't good. And so I just think we do them a disservice. I know asymmetrical warfare. I know it's different, and you can't draw a complete comparison. But when you look at the folks that came home from World War II or Korea, the expectation was that they would hitch up their pants and get on with their lives. Yeah. And for the most part, they did. Now, that doesn't mean there weren't problems. There were, but nothing like we see now. I mean, now PTSD is such a prevalent sort of a mindset in our country. And I don't buy into it. I don't agree with it at all. It's, you know, it's in the category when I was talking about Epictetus and what can you have some effect on. I don't have any effect on those kinds of things, but I do try to reinforce with, you know, I've had chances to speak to National Guard units and some active military organizations, and I just keep trying to reassure them that no matter what happens, they've got what it takes. I mean, you know, if you end up dead, you end up dead. But short of that, people are way, way stronger than we ever give ourselves credit for.
Dave, I have an interesting perspective of your captors and the interrogators. Did anybody kind of become friendly with you and try to befriend you and help you in some way, or were they just all lying SOBs? Or and you have to be careful who you partner with when you're over there. But tell us a little bit more about your captors and how they treated you.
Yeah, they were well. My quickest observation is they were just people. You know, if they were told to beat us, they beat us. If they were told to leave us alone, they left us alone. It was, and another thought is, I've had the opportunity to study communism up close and personal, and it is so counter to the way I've lived my life, or you've lived your lives, quite frankly. It is just absolutely impossible. You know, I'll make a statement here that's sort of a blanket. I don't like generalizations, but I'll tell you this. I don't think anybody listening to my voice right now really understands or knows what freedom means. You don't know what a blessing it is that you could stand up right now and go out your front door and turn left or right, or you could, it is such an incredible blessing for us. I watched the Vietnamese. I mean, they turned those people on and off like they had switches in them. I mentioned the radio speaker, for example, that they had in the cell. So sometimes they would play over at Vietnamese stuff, Vietnamese music, or if it got real quiet at night, we could hear the radio speakers in the hamlets and the villages around the prisons, because they all had radio speakers and they all played the same thing. It all came out of Hanoi. And so one night there'd be music on, nothing big deal. And the next morning the turnkey would open the cell and he'd be no big deal, go dump the buckets. That night they'd play the war on those speakers. Get on, get on, get on. Next morning that turnkey would open that door. He'd be so fired up and riled up. And then that night they'd play the music again and they just turn them back off. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life, how they manipulated the population. The primary precept of communism is the end justifies the means. That's it.
Yeah.
The end justifies the means. So therefore, when you sit back and think, how could the Russians have killed all those people? The end justifies the means. It ain't no big deal. And I see, I don't want to get political, but I see our country sliding towards socialism. And believe me, it's a great concern to me. I will not live that way. I think, well, we don't want to get into too much of that. So our captors they were just people. So I'll tell you a quick story. So on every plot of ground over there, they grew something. And in between a couple of the buildings, they had a pepper patch where they were growing jalapeno peppers. And the turnkey came and got another guy and I out of our cell one day and took us out there and told us to weed the pepper patch. He didn't speak any English, but we knew what he wanted. And so we weeded the pepper patch. And as we're weeding the pepper patch, this fellow's nickname was the Wizard. The Wizard and I are picking peppers and putting them in our pajama pants legs and rolling the pant leg up one. So by the time we get to the end of the pepper patch, we've got this like little inner tube of peppers around each of our legs. And Iron Jaw, the name for the turnkey was Iron Jaw, who was a sadist, called us over, didn't speak English, and he starts pointing at our legs. And we're like, oh man, come on, what? We don't understand. And finally he starts getting excited. And so we roll down our pant legs and now we're standing there with little piles of jalapeno peppers around our feet. And I mean, he is ripping on us. He is yum, 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 and he is chewing. And finally he makes waves his hand, which is a sign to get moving. And we go back to our cell the whole way back. And we go in and lock the door, slam the door, and he leaves. And our cellmates, our roommates go, whoa, what's Iron Jaw upset about? So we tell them the story and they say, oh, you guys are in trouble. This is going to be so bad. This is going to be, you better get your toothbrush and stick it in your pocket because you're going to disappear here and you're going to get the beating of your life. And, oh my goodness. I goes, so all day long, we're waiting for the guards to come get us and nothing happens. And finally about late in the afternoon, we hear the keys jingle. Let me tell you, the worst thing that could happen over there was to hear the keys jingle when it was not time for the keys to jingle. You hear the keys jingle, and the guys, all our roommates are saying, okay, well, this is it. Goodbye. It's been nice knowing you. Have a nice life. And the keys come up we hear them jingle. They come up to the door. The little spy door opens up. Whap! And this hand comes in, and it's full of peppers. Full of jalapeno peppers.
Oh my gosh.
And it goes like that. and it goes back out the hole and the door shuts and the keys jingle away. So even Iron Jaw had a heart. I mean, who'd have ever believed it, you know? So anyway.
That's good.
And we tried to groom these people. I mean, you know, they told us in survival school, if you're given these situations, try to, you know, see if you can't befriend somebody or groom them. Or so we tried. It wasn't successful. We just never got anywhere with them. We had another gun guard. They had gun guards that roamed around all night long, and we called him the little old man because he looked like a little old man, and he wanted to learn English. And so at night, he would come to the back window of the cell, and he would open the shutters, and he would be standing out there, and he wanted to learn English. And we had a guy, an Air Force guy with us, who had the patience to go work with the little old man. So you picture our guys on the inside hanging on the bars here, leaning on the bars, and the little old man's on the outside, and he's teaching him to speak English. He taught him to say, this is not politically correct. He taught him to say, "I am queer." So the little old man would then go around to all the cells, and he would practice his English, you know, and then he'd come back and Tom would teach him something else, and then he'd go practice his English. So if the little old man ever got anywhere where he needed English, he was in big trouble, I'll tell you. Yeah. So they were just people. They were just, you know.
That's good.
Did you guys celebrate holidays in any way?
did.
Easter or 4th of July? Tell us about Christmas.
Yeah, the guys that were first shot down, you know, Everett was there for 9 years almost. The early guys, when they were shot down, the Vietnamese didn't know what to do with them. They locked them up, of course, but they didn't have a program, or they didn't know what they were after, or they didn't. And so early on, those guys somehow convinced the Vietnamese that Christmas was a big deal, and that if there was anything at all humane in their hearts, Christmas would be a big deal. And so Christmas was a big deal. We would get a piece of candy. We would get some meat, maybe. We would get, on occasion, we would get some rice wine. They would come around with this jug of rice wine, and everybody'd hold their cup up, and they'd put a little bit of rice wine in the bottom of everybody's cup. So then we'd have to have a big discussion about whether we should all taste the rice wine, or whether we should put it all in one cup and draw straws and see if somebody could get a buzz. And then because Christmas was a big deal, then they had to make Tet a big deal, the Lunar New Year. I mean,
sure.
You couldn't have a Christmas celebration without a counter on their part. So Tet was a big deal, and we would get good food. So, so one of our lines always was "stall till Christmas." You know, when things were not going well, we'd tell guys, "Stall till Christmas, just stall till Christmas." Because so those two holidays they recognized. The others they didn't. We did our own things, like Thanksgiving. We would take turns describing in infinite detail what Thanksgiving was like when you were growing up. And likewise Christmas. We could spend days, we could spend weeks, depending on how many people were in a cell, describing how things were when you were growing up at Christmas, for example, stuff like that.
How about the 4th of July? Was that anything special to?
It was for us. It wasn't for them.
No. Did you do
we would have church. We would have church service every Sunday. The signal was to tap the letter C through the wall. So the letter C would come through the wall, and we would have church service. Church always consisted of the Lord's Prayer, the Pledge of Allegiance, and that was it. We didn't have any sermons to sleep through or anything. And so it was a little mixing of church and state there, but we thought it was okay. So, yeah. Any other comments or questions?
Anything else, gentlemen? Well, Dave, I'm second in command here after John Kent, and I am honored, and I speak, I think, for everyone in our whole organization, that we thank you for your service and for this excellent, excellent presentation. It has been wondrous to hear these things and to hear your resolve and to continue to uphold your principles. And I just am marveled by this. And I thank you so much for helping our country and helping us understand what was going on. Anyone else have any comments here? Please. Well, I
Thank
guess
you,
you're all
Dave.
muted. I don't know how to unmute you.
My pleasure. Everybody's muted. That's okay. That's okay. Thank you very
Okay.
much. It's been my pleasure. I've been delighted to be with you today.
Yeah, and okay,
Thank you
thank
so
you very
much.
much. Okay, there you go.
God bless.
Okay. All right, that'll conclude our meeting, guys.
Right here.
Is that what's his name?